We are in Genesis chapter 45.
Estamos en Génesis capítulo 45.
That sun is going to cause me a little bit of a problem there. We'll see how this works. Again, Genesis 45.
Génesis capítulo 45.
Here we see Joseph reveals himself to his brothers.
José se revela a sus hermanos.
His brothers are speechless.
Sus hermanos se quedan sin palabras.
Pharaoh and the Egyptians are joyful.
Faraón y los egipcios están alegres.
And the brothers are sent to bring their father back.
Los hermanos son enviados a traer de vuelta a su padre.
And we do see Jacob's response.
La respuesta de Jacob.
Joseph is alive, Genesis 45, verses 1 through 15.
José está vivo, Génesis capítulo 45, verso 1 al 15.
I know this is a lengthy section here, but we're going to read this and then we're going to break it down. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. And he cried, Cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. Verse 6. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in the which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. And ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and all that ye have seen, and ye shall haste and bring down my father hither. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brethren and wept upon them, and after that his brethren talked with him.
Capítulo 45, verso 1 al 15. No podía ya José contenerse delante de todos los que estaban al lado suyo, y clamó, Haced salir de mi presencia a todos, y no quedó nadie con él al darse a conocer José a sus hermanos. Entonces se dio a llorar a gritos, y oyeron los egipcios, y oyó también la casa de Faraón. Y dijo José a sus hermanos, Yo soy José, ¿vive aún mi padre? Y sus hermanos no pudieron responderle porque estaban turbados delante de él. Entonces dijo José a sus hermanos, Acercaos ahora a mí, y ellos se acercaron, y él dijo, Yo soy José vuestro hermano, el que vendisteis para Egipto. Ahora pues no os entristezcáis ni os pese de haberme vendido acá, porque para preservación de vida me envió Dios delante de vosotros. Pues ya ha habido 2 años de hambre en medio de la tierra, y aún quedan 5 años en los cuales ni habrá arada ni siega. Y Dios me envió delante de vosotros para preservaros posteridad sobre la tierra, y para daros vida por medio de gran liberación. Así pues no me enviasteis acá vosotros, sino Dios, que me ha puesto por padre de Faraón, y por señor de toda su casa, y por gobernador en toda la tierra de Egipto. Daos prisa, id a mi padre y decidle: así dice tu hijo José, Dios me ha puesto por señor de todo Egipto. Ven a mí, no te detengas, habitarás en la tierra de Gosén y estarás cerca de mí, tú y tus hijos y los hijos de tus hijos, tus ganados, tus vacas y todo lo que tienes. Y ahí te alimentaré, pues aún quedan 5 años de hambre, para que no perezcas de pobreza tú y tu casa y todo lo que tienes. He aquí vuestros ojos ven y los ojos de mi hermano Benjamín, que mi boca os habla. Haréis pues saber a mi padre toda mi gloria en Egipto y todo lo que habéis visto. Y daos prisa y traed a mi padre acá. Y se echó sobre el cuello de Benjamín su hermano y lloró, y también Benjamín lloró sobre su cuello, y besó a todos sus hermanos y lloró sobre ellos, y después sus hermanos hablaron con él.
Joseph is overwhelmed and can no longer contain himself.
José está abrumado y ya no puede contenerse.
He has been watching their response and what they are like now.
Ha estado observando sus respuestas y cómo son ahora.
As you will recall, last week in chapter 44, we saw Judah intercede for Benjamin. He was willing to stay in Benjamin's place. In fact, he pleaded with Joseph to do so.
Como recordarán, la semana pasada en el capítulo 44 vimos a Judá interceder por Benjamín. Él estaba dispuesto a quedarse en el lugar de Benjamín. De hecho, le rogó a José que lo hiciera.
And you can read there at the end of chapter 44 about that.
Pueden leer eso al final del verso 44, chapter 4.
Chapter 44.
Del capítulo 44.
He tells his brothers that he is Joseph, who they had sold into slavery.
Les dice a sus hermanos que él es José, a quien habían vendido como esclavo.
He asked them of his father's well-being.
Les preguntó por el bienestar de su padre.
They are troubled at his presence, King James Version. The New King James Version says they're dismayed. The NIV uses the word terrified.
Están turbados ante su presencia. En la versión King James dice consternados. Usa la palabra aterrorizados.
Joseph reassures them and tells them that God has brought this about. He tells them of the famine.
José los tranquiliza y les dice que Dios ha provocado esto. Les habla de la hambruna.
God has put him into a position of great authority and favor with Pharaoh to save them.
Dios lo ha puesto en una posición de gran autoridad y favor ante Faraón para salvarlos.
He tells them of his intent for them to come to Egypt and be close to him.
Les cuenta su intención de que vengan a Egipto y estén cerca de él.
He tells them to tell his father that he is alive and well. Tell him of his glory.
Les dice que le digan a su padre que está vivo y bien, y que le cuenten de su gloria.
Genesis chapter 45, verses 16 through 21.
Génesis capítulo 45, verso 16 al 21.
And the famine thereof was heard, and the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come. And it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Say unto thy brethren, This do ye, lade your beast, and go, get you unto the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and ye shall eat the fat of the land. Now thou art commanded, this do ye, take you wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones, and for your wives, and bring your father, and come. And regard not your stuff, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. And the children of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh, and gave them provision for the way.
Verso 16 al 21. Y se oyó la noticia en la casa de Faraón diciendo, los hermanos de José han venido. Y esto agradó en los ojos de Faraón y de sus siervos. Y dijo Faraón a José, di a tus hermanos, haced esto, cargad vuestras bestias e id, volved a la tierra de Canaán. Y tomad a vuestro padre y a vuestras familias y venid a mí, porque yo os daré lo bueno de la tierra de Egipto y comeréis de la abundancia de la tierra. Y tú manda hacer esto, tomaos de la tierra de Egipto carros para vuestros niños y vuestras mujeres, y traed a vuestro padre y venid. Y no os preocupéis por vuestros enseres, porque la riqueza de la tierra de Egipto será vuestra. Y lo hicieron así los hijos de Israel, y les dio José carros conforme a la orden de Faraón, y les suministró víveres para el camino.
Pharaoh and the Egyptians have heard this and are joyful for Joseph.
Faraón y los egipcios oyeron esto y se alegraron por José.
Pharaoh tells Joseph to send his brothers to get his father and family.
Faraón le dice a José que envíe a sus hermanos a buscar a su padre y a su familia.
He says that he will give them all that they need. Don't worry about their stuff.
Dice que les dará todo lo que necesiten, no te preocupes por sus cosas.
Clearly, Pharaoh holds Joseph in great esteem.
Es evidente que el faraón tiene en gran estima a José.
Notice that Joseph gave each of them gifts, but he gave more to Benjamin. He sent much to his father.
Note que José le dio regalos a cada uno de ellos, pero le dio más a Benjamín, envió mucho a su padre.
He, as Pharaoh had instructed, sent wagons for them to bring their children and all their stuff.
Él, tal como Faraón había ordenado, les envió carros para que trajeran a sus hijos y todo.
Verses 25 through 28.
Verso 25 al 28.
We'll back up. We'll read verses 22 because we kind of skipped over those.
Okay.
Beginning in verse 22. To all of them he gave each man charges of raiment, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 charges of raiment. And to his father he sent after this manner 10 donkeys laden with the good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. So he sent his brethren away, and they departed, and he said unto them, see that ye fall not out by the way. And they went up out of Egypt, and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And Israel said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die.
Vamos a leer desde el verso 22 al 28. A cada uno de todos ellos dio mudas de vestidos, y a Benjamín dio 300 piezas de plata y 5 mudas de vestidos. Y a su padre envió esto, 10 asnos cargados de lo mejor de Egipto, y 10 asnas cargadas de trigo, y pan y comida para su padre en el camino. Y despidió a sus hermanos, y ellos se fueron, y él les dijo, no riñáis por el camino. Y subieron de Egipto, y llegaron a la tierra de Canaán a Jacob su padre, y le dieron las nuevas diciendo, José vive aún, y, y él es Señor en toda la tierra de Egipto. Y el corazón de Jacob se afligió porque no lo creía. Y ellos le contaron todas las palabras de José que él les había hablado, y viendo Jacob los carros que José enviaba para llevarlo, su espíritu revivió. Entonces dijo Israel, basta, José mi hijo vive todavía, iré y le veré antes que yo muera.
They returned to their father.
Regresan con su padre.
What do you think was going through their minds?
¿Qué crees que pasaba por sus mentes?
They have to return and tell their father that, in fact, Joseph is alive.
Tienen que regresar y decirle a su padre que efectivamente José está vivo.
Might they have worried that Israel would learn of what they had done?
¿Podría haberles preocupado que Israel se enterara de lo que habían hecho?
Would they have felt the need to come clean?
¿Habrían sentido la necesidad de confesarle?
How would Israel respond to this?
¿Cómo respondería Israel a esto?
They tell Jacob that Joseph is not only alive, but he is over Egypt.
Le dice a Jacob que José no solo está vivo, sino que está sobre Egipto.
What must have gone through Jacob's mind?
¿Qué debió haber pasado por la mente de Jacob?
His son, who he thought was dead, is alive.
Su hijo que creía muerto está vivo.
He faints.
Él se desmaya.
They tell their father all that Joseph said.
Le cuenta a su padre todo lo que dijo José.
Did they include that they had sold him into slavery?
¿Incluía que lo habían vendido como esclavo?
Jacob sees all that Joseph sent, and he is revived.
Jacob ve todo lo que José envió y revive.
Notice Israel's response in verse 28.
Note la respuesta de Israel en el versículo 28.
And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die.
Entonces dijo Israel, basta, José mi hijo vive todavía, iré y le veré antes que yo muera.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
¿Alguna pregunta o comentario?
Before you ask any questions, I want to go back to something. Did they include that they had sold him into slavery? Incluyan que lo habían vendido como esclavo. Because it says they told everything Joseph said, or that Joseph said. Joseph told them, "Hey, don't worry about that. You sold me into you sold me into slavery. Don't worry about it. God sent me here." So, you think they included that? That oh well, we sold him into slavery all those years ago.
Yeah,
That's kind of a do what?
they'd have to.
You would think so, although they could have, because what premise did they, if you go back and look at what they did, they brought the coat. Well, you decide, is this your son's coat? And they let their father believe that an animal had torn him to pieces, devoured him. So they could have tried to go along with that, but somewhere along the lines, you have to think that
Yeah, it's got to.
it comes out. And what would have Joseph or Jacob, Israel, what would he have thought? You know, I've thought my boy was dead all these years, and turns out his brothers. Although I wonder, and I've said this before, I've wondered if he kind of had his suspicions. Remember what he said about sending Benjamin? He said, "Unless some mischief befall him." Now that could have just been, some happenstance, but you've been thinking about it, Steve. You had some comments.
I don't know what I was going to say now. Oh, I just think, they would just have to lie again, be another lie. And I don't know, at that point, Jacob's so happy that he was alive, he didn't care. Because obviously later when he blesses his sons, he doesn't bring that up.
No, but
He brings other things up.
and he does kind of give him a little whack with his blessings that he gives them.
Well, nothing with this.
But he doesn't. You're right. He doesn't mention specifically, and obviously Jacob, Israel knows God, so hearing, hey, God had this in mind, would he have said, yeah, hey, God
Could have skirted around the issue, but still,
sooner or later,
the years as they went here, I'm not sure how old he was when he died.
Jacob
Yeah,
Jacob was 147, I think. He lived another 17 years in
17
Egypt.
years. So sometime that
So he's 130
it would
here.
come up, the story or somebody with it.
You would think.
But I don't think it really matters to him now, because not only did Joseph say it because God, that maybe Jacob also realized God's plans, that this was, because he made the promise to Abraham that his descendants would be in a foreign land for 400 years.
Yeah.
Was that repeated, that particular, to Jacob and Isaac, Jacob?
I don't know that was. I would have to go back and look. I don't know if that was ever.
So Jacob could
How
have
much
just
that-
thought, well, that's God's providence.
Yeah.
Work this out.
Well, Joseph clearly identified
Yeah.
here, and then later in
Right.
chapter 50 and verse 20, capítulo 50 y verse 20, he identifies that, that God's, he doesn't use the word providence, but that's what he's talking about, the providence of God, line of faith.
Well, you were talking about, you wondered if Jacob had suspected anything. And if you think about it, Jacob wasn't innocent.
No.
He had done things, and I would imagine that he probably would question.
No, and that's one of the interesting things that you see God's people in here. The Bible doesn't try to, and that's one of the things that I've heard over the years and had people point to, and I think it's valid, that you read these things about God's people, and you're not reading, oh, how great all these folks were. They were all just wonderful and never had any problems. You're hearing about, Jacob was the one that the promise was to come through and all, and we know what Esau, the Bible describes him, he's not described very favorably, but Jacob was what? Deceitful? A liar?
Well, go back to of him playing favorites with Joseph was his favorite, and the boys got so jealous. He could have seen, it's my fault that it all took place.
And that's a possibility too, because he did play favorites with Joseph. Of course, then again, you look at his parents, Jacob's parents, and his parents had favorites. Jacob was his mother's favorite, and of course Isaac preferred Esau. And so you see that difference, and that we talked about the favoritism and how that can cause, and we see that today, don't we? We see, oftentimes parents have a favorite, and so you look at that, and it can cause problems. I didn't put it in the notes and all, but here it identifies, Joseph identifies that God sent him into Egypt. He brought all this about for this purpose, to save them. Later on, we're going to see some other reasons, not in the book of Genesis. I don't think it ever deals with it there, but we know that he also brought them down into Egypt to what? Kind of bring them into that setting and keep them controlled, I guess, in a controlled setting, keep them isolated from these other people, and keep their lineage pure, I guess we'll say. Because what's the ultimate promise? You go all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. What's the ultimate promise?
Of Christ.
Christ. You look there in Genesis 12. verses 1 through 3, and well, 1 through 4, 1 through 3, 4. Um, what do you see? You see that you have multiple promises there, but one of those promises, and the promise, is what? To bless all nations through Abraham's seed. Paul, in what? I think it's Galatians, points out, what's the seed? Who's the seed? It's Christ. It's not, he didn't say seeds, he says seed. So ultimately, he brings them down into Egypt to keep them there and ultimately bringing about down the road, bringing Christ. Bill?
I was concerned what they told Jacob, I would say that again, if they mention that to what they did to Joseph, they got them to go to the job, and then the first thing he said, they told him all that Joseph told him.
And you do see quite a bit of change as well in their behavior. We noted there at the end of 44 where what was Judah's, when the brothers wanted to kill Joseph to start with. You remember, Reuben speaks up and says, hey, no, he's our brother, don't kill him. And Reuben, the unstable as water, Reuben, he decides to what? He's gonna appease them right now, and he's gonna bring Joseph back to dad. Judah says, let's not kill him, he's our brother. But what's Judah's thought? Judah says, let's make some money off of all this. Sell him into slavery. Why should we kill him? Hide his blood, and then, he's our brother, but, let's make some money off this. But with Benjamin, he tells his father he'll be surety for him. And then, not knowing that it's Joseph, of course, what does he tell Joseph? Please, let me stay. And he goes through, rehashes that story, if you will, of what's happened, and Joseph is dead for all he knows, and how can I go back and face my father? And Benjamin here in slavery, so he sees there's a difference in them. So I do think that if not before, here they had to have said, hey, he's alive. Turns out, we sold him off into slavery. We confess we sold him off into slavery. Now he's governor of Israel. By the way, we bowed down to him. I think we're up to like 3, 4 times. They're going to bow down to him again before it's all said and done. But
on the question of their attitude when they come back, when they first told him, they came and showed him the toe. His father mourned. They mourned with him. Can you imagine? I mean, they were lying.
I know. Can you?
But now, seeing their dad go through that, and with Benjamin, they could not make him go through that again. That tells you where they've grown to.
You'd hope so. And we all have done stupid things. I mean, I've told many of you probably that when I was in college, I lied to my professor. I exaggerated to him. I gave information out of order that I had stepped on a nail because I had a paper or something I had to turn in and didn't have it. So I skipped school and stepped on a rusty nail and had to go get a tetanus shot. I just didn't tell him that I had had skipped school before, and I actually limped around campus for 2-3 days because of that. It's amazing what people who will lie will go through to hold that lie together. But at some point, what? Lies up, right? And that was wrong of me, by the way. I just want to say I shouldn't have behaved like that. That was a long, long time ago.
Verse 19.
Verse 19. 19.
New King James uses the term cart. King James uses the term wagon.
Wagons, yeah.
This is the first mention of a wheeled vehicle.
Are you trying to say they created the wheeled vehicle here, Jim?
I'm saying this is the first mention in the Bible of a wheeled vehicle.
Oh, okay.
And we don't see the Hebrews using it again until they start to moving the tabernacle.
Yeah.
And
God,
then it was only to move the tabernacle, not for any other, it was for the benefit of all, God,
yeah.
and not for individuals.
Yeah.
We don't see Hebrews using it again until after we get it in the time of David and maybe some chariots.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think David had chariots.
Yeah,
So
but not before then.
at least we're not told. We're not told here in the Bible about it.
Well, when they
But-
took Jacob back to bury him, they get chariots.
Yeah, they would have used
Well,
some kind of.
we see them, the Egyptians' army, you with chariots, chasing them across the Red Sea, and of course they get
That didn't work out real well.
down.
At least not for the Egyptians.
Metal chariots don't float.
Yeah. Not too well, especially with all that water. But anyone else have any questions or comments? Hermano? Well, we'll break off at this point, and we'll be in chapter 46 next week. So go ahead and be looking at that as we continue the saga.